Welcome to the Hard Questions, Real Answers podcast, and today we are wrapping up our series on systematic theology with my special guest, Professor of Theology and Biblical Studies, Dr. Wayne Grudem. Wayne, thanks again for coming back.
Thank you, Nat.
Well, we've been hitting some very hard topics. We've talked about women's roles in the church. We've talked about just what systematic theology is. And today we're going to talk about end times. I mean, if there's one thing that there's no debate over, it's end time theology, right?
You're being ironic.
Oh, of course I am. Of course I am. As when I served at the E-Free Church, we would host these classes, and we would talk through different doctrine. And much like in seminary, we would talk about all the different positions, and we would talk through them and wrestle through them. And people got really uncomfortable. And I think it's a good thing because you're now encountering Scripture and having to look how to interpret in light of Scripture. So let's talk about end times theology. We talk about premillennialism, amillennialism, and postmillennialism. Just for our listeners, what are those and what makes them distinct?
Well, the best way to understand them and to remember is they're talking about when Jesus returns. Everybody agrees there's some sense in which Jesus is going to come back. Well, just about everybody. There's one minor view that thinks he already came back secretly.
Right.
But 99%.
Yeah, you're not buying that one, I don't think, right?
I'm not buying that one.
Okay.
99% or more of evangelical Christians believe that Jesus is coming back personally, visibly, bodily. He'll come back and reign over the earth. Now the question is he going to come pre, post, or millennial? Well, what do you mean, pre, post, or It means this. Millennium is a Latin word meaning 1,000 years. So there's many people think in Revelation 20, there's a picture of people being raised to live on the earth in resurrection bodies and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Now, if you're a premillennialist, you believe that Christ will come back before that 1,000-year reign, before the millennium. If you're a postmillennialist, you think that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign of Christians on the earth, and Christ will come back after that millennium, post meaning after. Well, there's one left, the amillennialist. Means without. And these people think that we're in the millennium already. The 1,000 years mentioned in Revelation 20 speak about this church age when the church is growing throughout the earth, and all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus, as it says in Matthew 28. And so this is now the only thing that's going to happen in terms of the nature of the age until Christ returns suddenly and bodily, and there's a final judgment immediately, but no further millennium other than this current age. So I take a premillennial view, but I have friends who take an amillennial view, and there are some evangelicals who take a postmillennial view today. And it'd be healthy for us to take a deep breath and admit we're talking about future events, and in the nature of future events, we don't understand them fully. And so we should give a little more room for people to differ if they sincerely believe the Bible, room to differ about these questions. The only question that I'd say would be outside the realm of acceptable teachings is preterism, full preterism, the idea that Jesus already returned in 70 AD and there's no future reign of Christ on the earth to look forward to. I think so much in Scripture contradicts that I wouldn't hire a pastor who believed that. I wouldn't vote to hire a pastor if I were an elder in a local church. Or I wouldn't vote to hire a faculty member who held full preterism in an evangelical seminary. I think that would rule him out. But premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial, I don't think that would be a deal breaker.
So I think what you're saying is it's a fun thing to debate, it's a fun thing to study, but we don't have to be dogmatic about it within certain reason and boundaries and what you just laid out. Because eschatology does matter. It does matter. Christ is coming back, and he is physically going to return, and we must hold tightly to that. When that could be debated. Now, you said you are a premillennialist, which I knew, but even there's some different opinions on when he comes back. Isn't that right?
Whether or not Christians will go through a time of great tribulation, 7 years
Yes.
of great suffering on the earth,
Right.
I tend to think we will, and God's grace will be poured out on us. We will know his presence in a more wonderful way in the midst of very difficult times. But I'm not sure about that. When I was in college, my pastor was Harold John Ockengay at Park Street Church in Boston. And he gave this illustration of the waves of the sea coming in as the tide goes up every day at a certain point. And if you didn't have a chart, you wouldn't know when high tide was exactly. But you see wave after wave coming, and they come further and further up on the shore. And then they recede, and then another wave comes and it recedes. And so it is throughout history. There are different times when it looks as though the signs of Christ's return, there are wars and rumors of wars, there are earthquakes, there's oppression and persecution of believers in China and India and sub-Saharan Africa, in much of Southeast Asia. Is this the time of Christ's return? It's possible, and it looks more and more likely, and then the waves recede, and then they come closer again. We may not know until it actually happens.
Right.
But I'm ready. I want to be ready, and expect Jesus could come back any day.
Right. Christ's return is imminent, and so I think one of the ways we can apply the reality of this is to live like it, to live intentionally
Right.
each day on mission to glorify God while reaching the lost at any cost. And
You must
that's
be ready,
part of,
for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect.
you couldn't have said it any better than that. Well,
Jesus
Dr.
said
Grudem, I know he did, but you're quoting him, so come on now. Our listeners know that. Well, Wade, I appreciate the time today. I hope to have you back on the show. But again, for our listeners, check out his book, Systematic Theology. If they want to learn more about you, do you have a website that they can go to?
WayneGrudem.com.
Doesn't get any easier than that. WayneGrudem.com. Pick up a copy of his book and interact with it. It is a must-have resource outside the Bible, of course. Dr. Grudem, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you for listening to the Hard Questions, Real Answers podcast. To learn more about our podcast, be sure you check out backtothebible.org. Also, if you enjoy our program, be sure to give us a rating and share us if you like us on your favorite podcasting app. Remember, ask the hard questions and only accept real answers.